In the world of metal, where crushing riffs and piercing screams are the norm, James Hetfield is a living contradiction. He is the iron-fisted leader, the face and soul of Metallica, the band that defined an entire generation of thrash metal. He is also a guy who has been scarred for life by childhood wounds, a father who left him, a mother who died from an illness she refused to cure, and a boyhood full of rage. He is a beast on stage, with a roar like a jet engine and a guitar that hits each rhythm like a hammer strike. This drives tens of thousands of spectators into a frenzy of headbanging. But there is another James Hetfield behind the bright lights. He drank so much that he passed out, and his marriage ended after more than 20 years. And whose life was always on the verge of self-destruction. Hetfield has been at the top for more than 40 years, showing the power of willpower and the harsh price of fame. After all the fame and the cries that fill stadiums, there is still a man who is fighting with the ghosts of his past and his addiction. And one question keeps coming up on his travels. What elements of himself has James Hetfield had to give up in exchange for music that will last forever? James Allen Hetfield was born on August 3, 1963, in Downey, California, a tranquil neighborhood. But inside the small Hetfield home, there were fights and tragedies that were kept secret. Virgil Hetfield, his father, drove trucks all over the United States. James' father's presence in his recollection was distant and transient, like that of a guest who came and went. His mother, Cynthia Bassett, on the other hand, chose a career in the arts. She was a semi-professional opera singer who helped James feel emotionally connected to music for the first time. James only felt warmth in the family on the occasional nights when she sang in the living room. They also planted the first seeds of art in his soul. But with that love of music comes a sharp wall. His parents were both very religious and felt that prayer and devotion could heal any ailment. They thought that modern medicine was a sign of a lack of faith. In that house, going to the doctor, getting medicine, or going to the hospital were all against the rules. It was like an unseen jail for a kid like James. The disparities became much more obvious at school. James was thin and shy, so he often had to sit out of physical education classes, medical examinations, or sporting activities that his classmates did. When he was sick or hurt, he couldn't do anything but sit still while his mother mumbled prayers. Those years gave him a taste of being alone early on. Of being left behind in a culture where he was expected to fit in. There was a faint rage inside him. Why did the rest of the world get to live normally while he was stuck by regulations that no one else understood? Then the true catastrophe happened. Virgil, James's father, left in 1976 when James was only 13. This left James and his mother without a home. 3 years later, he had another terrible blow before he could get over the first one. Cynthia died of cancer in 1979. She didn't want to have treatment for it, so she gave in to God's plan. James lost both of his parents in just a few years when he was only 16. His family was broken. He took what little he had and moved in with his half-brother. In that moment, his short childhood came to an end with grief and loss. These were the dark days that made James's fury burn. James started to experiment in the room where his brother had left behind drums, a piano, and a pile of old albums. First he played the drums, then the piano, and ultimately the guitar, which would become his lifelong weapon. The teen would listen to Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Motorhead on long, lonely evenings. Then he fumbled through the chords, letting the riffs drown out his sadness and the heavy music's loudness take the place of the strangled cries in his heart. That experience left him with more than just mental wounds, it also gave him the tools he needed for his whole career. Songs about grief, treachery, and being left behind. These things didn't just happen by chance in Metallica's work. They were echoes of a James Hetfield who learned to deal with loneliness and mortality when he was a teenager. A James who had to grow up in the dark before he could really be a kid. James Hetfield's guitar was his sole friend during those lonely days when he was walking around his half-brother's empty room. He never took music lessons. He played by instinct, as if every note was a fist that let out all the anger that had built up inside him. He rapidly found friends who thought like him and joined a few high school bands, like Leather Charm and Obsession. He did this not only to play on little school stages, but also to feel the sense of belonging that his family never offered him. By the end of the 1970s, America was still in the middle of an economic crisis and social upheaval. For a lot of young people, the future came down to two choices: work in a factory or try to get away from it all with music, drugs, or pointless excursions. James chose music. And that decision brought him to a turning point that would change his life. James found an item in the recycler's Los Angeles ads in October 1981. It was from a young Danish drummer named Lars Ulrich who wanted to establish a metal band. James answered, and their meeting was like a flash of lightning. One was a sad, furious, poor youngster. The other was a teenager from a rich family who had given up on a promising tennis career to follow rock music. They didn't have anything in common on paper. But when James's guitar hit Lars's hammering drums in Lars's modest garage, something unexpected happened. That was when Metallica's seed was planted. The first group was a bit difficult. James, Lars, guitarist Dave Mustaine, and talented bassist Cliff Burton, who only agreed to join if the band moved to San Francisco, where an underground metal culture was starting to form. Everyone was quick to act. They gave up the glitz and glam of Los Angeles and moved to the Bay Area, where they rented frigid houses, lived on instant noodles, and slept on floors. In return, they had to rehearse and perform in small venues every night. Metallica's early shows weren't very good. There weren't many people in the crowd, and several of them left halfway through. But their speed, anger, and harsh sound began to reach a group of young people who had been ignored, those who wanted music that spoke to their anger and loneliness. James Hetfield, who had once been an abandoned child, was now in front of the microphone, crying out all he had kept inside. And over time, those shouts stopped being just his and became the voice of a whole generation. But that desire brought on pandemonium. In the first several months, the band broke apart because of fights and young people who didn't care about anything. Dave Mustaine was a great guitarist with a short fuse. He drank too much and got into fights. He would often come to practices inebriated, get into fights with other band members, and even fight while on tour. Hetfield, who drank a lot himself, realized that Mustaine was losing control and felt that the band couldn't last with such a ticking time bomb. Metallica made the tough but necessary decision to remove Mustaine in April 1983, only a few months before they were going to record. They quickly asked Kirk Hammett, the guitarist for Exodus, to take over. Kirk was young, quiet, and very good at what he did. He was just what the band needed. The change turned out to be right quite quickly. That same year, Metallica recorded their first album, Kill 'Em All, on a modest budget from Megaforce Records. The music was an unprecedented explosion. It was as quick as punk, as hard as Black Sabbath, and angrier than anything else on the radio at the moment. Kill 'Em All is thought to be the start of thrash metal, a new style of music that changed the lives of a whole generation. The record spread through pirated cassettes and underground groups, making Metallica cult figures in just one summer, even though radio and MTV didn't pay attention to it. They went back to the studio in 1984 with more confidence and made Ride the Lightning. If Kill 'Em All was the angry manifesto of youth, then Ride the Lightning showed that Metallica could get better without losing their power. The album dealt with conflict, the death penalty, and the fear of dying. Serious topics that go much beyond just amusement. The music was still stormy, but for the first time, Hetfield and his bandmates added melodic depth, complicated patterns, and eerie silences to it. People who didn't like Metallica before started to see them in a new light. They weren't just a band of rebels, they were real musicians who were opening up new possibilities for heavy metal. Master of Puppets, which came out in 1986, was Metallica's best album ever. People say this album is the best thrash metal record ever. Each song was like a knife, with cutting technique and haunting message about war, manipulation, narcotics, and the cost of freedom. Master of Puppets didn't only make Metallica the kings of the 1980s metal wave. The press said it was the best metal record ever made. The Wanderers, who had only 3 records, had become a worldwide sensation, selling out gigs wherever they went. But before the glory could really set in, catastrophe ripped everything apart. Metallica was at the top of their game with Master of Puppets in September 1986, and they set off on the most important tour of their history in Europe. Their bus was going fast through Sweden's snowy countryside early on September 27 when it abruptly went off the road. The car flipped over many times in the pandemonium, breaking windows. Bodies and tools were tossed violently into the cold, dark, choking air. James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Kirk Hammett crawled out of the wreckage with scrapes and bruises. A wonder that they were still alive. But Cliff Burton, a 24-year-old bass prodigy, wasn't as lucky. The bus hit him and threw him through a window. It crashed on top of him, crushing him right away and burying all of his dreams and unfinished work with him. Metallica's heart was broken when Cliff died. James Hetfield didn't cry that night. He yelled. He walked several miles down the snowy road in a fit of wrath and despair, looking for the black ice patch that the driver said caused the crash. But he didn't find anything, he merely felt empty and powerless. James even promised to kill the driver because he thought Cliff had died because he was being irresponsible. It wasn't simply rage, it was the craziness of a man who had just lost the most important part of himself. The pain didn't go away, it stayed with James for years as a shadow. He drank instead of grieving or dealing with it. Every night, vodka bottles became the medicine that erased his memories. The alcohol helped him forget, but it also made him less clear-headed, which made him an angry man who was always ready to blow up. After Cliff died, Metallica went on, but it was never the same family again. The band hired Jason Newsted a few months later to try to fill the hole that couldn't be filled. Jason was young, talented, and anxious to show himself. He had all the passion of someone who was ready to sacrifice all. But from the start, he was faced with frigid loneliness. They dubbed it hazing, which is a kind of initiation. In actuality, it was a long string of bullying. Jason was not allowed to write songs, and his ideas were not taken into account. It was even worse on the album. In 1988's And Justice for All, his bass lines were tuned down so low that they were practically impossible to hear. He gave it his all on stage, but his records almost erased him from history. As Metallica's success grew, selling millions of records and filling stadiums, a silent rift began to grow inside the band. Jason was pushed to the edges, and instead of keeping the group together, James Hetfield drank more and got angrier, which made the gap even worse. Metallica kept going after years of loss and fighting inside the band. They put out And Justice for All in 1988. The lyrics of this album are deep and complicated, and they talk about conflict, justice, and the corruption of authority. It was a huge creative leap that showed Metallica could be more than just a rebellious band. But it was very clear that Cliff Burton was not there. The bass of Jason Newsted was brought down so low that it was virtually inaudible, making the CD sound like music without a soul. People liked how ambitious it was, but they didn't like how empty it was in its center. In 1991, everything changed. The Black Album, which was Metallica's first album, changed more than just their fortunes. They changed their place in the history of music. Metallica's songs like Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, and the timeless ballad Nothing Else Matters were shorter and easier to listen to, which made them huge hits on radio and MTV. The record sold more than 16 million copies in the US alone, making them superstars all over the world. They won Grammys, topped the charts, and became the first metal band to bring millions of mainstream fans into the heavy storm of their music. James Hetfield was officially named one of the most powerful frontmen in rock history because of his booming voice and strong presence. But there was a terrible side to glory. Some die-hard admirers, the same ones who used to love illicit tapes of Kill 'Em All, turned their backs. They said Metallica had sold out, giving up the raw thrash spirit for fame and money. But most people saw a band that had grown up and found a way to mix art and mainstream appeal. That precise divide made Metallica stand out. Some people despised them with all their hearts, while others adored them just as much. And once again, fate threw them into disaster. During a gig in Montreal in August 1992, a pyrotechnics accident set James Hetfield on fire straight on stage. The fire burned his arm and the front of his torso, giving him second and third-degree burns that hurt. The whole event turned into chaos, with angry fans rioting because they thought the band had left. But only 17 days later, James was back on stage with a fully bandaged arm. Even though he couldn't play guitar, he stood at the microphone and yelled as if to challenge death itself. It became a picture that will never fade in history. James Hetfield was a man who could be roasted alive by fire, yet he would never leave the stage. After the Black Album, it looked like Metallica would always be at the top, but the road ahead led to a time of great conflict and trouble. The band put out Load and Reload in 1996 and 1997, one after the other. It was a bold move. Their sound changed from thrash metal to blues rock and southern rock, with slower tempos and more complex melodies. There was also a change in the way things looked. They chopped their distinctive long hair short, traded ripped jeans for crisp suits, and even donned eyeliner in advertising images. For a lot of people, it showed that Metallica could sell millions of records and appeal to more than just metal fans. But for die-hard fans who loved the raw chords on Kill 'Em All, it was a devastating betrayal. A lot of people made fun of Metallica for dying here. James Hetfield himself said years later that he had never liked that picture. He was still a traditionalist at heart and didn't like to move too far from his roots. Metallica's sales were still huge, but they had lost some of the thrash soul that made them famous. Then there was a media storm. Metallica was the first big band to sue Napster in 2000. The burgeoning internet file-sharing service that breaks copyright. They were right in the eyes of the law. But the band's image as rebellious heroes fell apart overnight in the eyes of young people. They were called rich millionaires who were greedy and hypocritical and were seeking to kill a culture of free sharing instead of being warriors against the system. It left a profound mark on their reputation that still hurts to this day. The fortress's insides weren't strong either. In 2001, Jason Newsted, the bassist who had been with Metallica for 14 years since Cliff Burton's death, said he was leaving. His rationale was simple, yet it broke my heart. He was never permitted to share his thoughts and was always regarded like an outsider, which inhibited his creativity. For a lot of fans, it was a warning sign. Metallica had lost the sense of togetherness that had helped them get through their biggest losses. The real storm came in 2003 when Saint Anger came out. It was supposed to be a new beginning, but it turned out to be a disaster. Lars Ulrich's drums sounded like hammering on oil barrels, there were no guitar solos, and everything was a chaotic mess that reviewers labeled the band's worst creative failure. A year later, the documentary Some Kind of Monster came out, which was a huge blow to their reputation of being invincible. Fans glimpsed the band's broken core for the first time. Hetfield going to rehab, James and Lars always fighting, Kirk Hammett stuck in the middle, and the band on the verge of breaking up. The movie was both startling and made people feel human. Even big metal things could rust from the inside. When artistic egos and personal traumas could no longer be masked. Metallica made it through that terrible time, but they weren't as famous as they used to be. And James Hetfield, who used to be a huge star in front of tens of thousands of people, had to confront the truth. He was fighting more than only the crowd and his bandmates, he was also fighting the demons inside him. James came out of rehab a different person. He stayed sober, learned to deal with his inner demons instead of drinking them away, and spent more time with his family. It was a time when he not only saved his job, but also himself. Death Magnetic, an album that came out in 2008, was a powerful comeback for Metallica. After years of trying new things and making mistakes, they went back to their thrash beginnings. Razor-sharp riffs, a fast tempo, and lyrics that cut into life, death, and rebirth. The record was called The Real Metallica Is Back, and it topped the charts in more than 30 countries. It showed that people who were previously deemed to be broken could come back to life with the music that gave them life. In 2009, a year later, Metallica were officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A big event that made sure they would always be remembered in popular music history. Their tours across the world went on, and in 2013 they set a record that no other band had ever set before. They played in Antarctica for scientists and station soldiers, making them the first band to play on all 7 continents. It wasn't just a concert, it was a sign of Metallica's strength that would never shatter. But the past never goes away completely. James Hetfield went back to treatment for the second time in 2019, after being sober for more than 15 years. This time, he chose to be honest instead of hiding it. Metallica called off their whole tour of Australia and New Zealand so James could focus on getting better. The band put friendship and health above all else, instead of money and fame. This is something they would never have done when they were younger. Fans felt sorry for James after that transformation, which made him seem less like an indestructible hero and more like a person who was weak, fragile, and brave enough to face it. In 2023, Metallica released 72 Seasons, a concept album on the first 18 years of life, which James thinks shape a person as a whole. The songs were about his horrible past, wrath, and wounds, but they also showed the strong spirit of a survivor. It wasn't just music, it was the story of a guy who had been through enough agony to know that the past can never be erased, but it can be converted into strength. James Hetfield is now 60 years old and is seen as an elder statesman of metal and a rock chieftain. He still roars with grit and intensity on stage, but offstage he is quiet and thoughtful. Hetfield is now proof that genuine strength is not in never falling, but in getting back up after every fall and playing the music that keeps his heart pounding. He went from being an orphan youngster with a guitar to a legend almost destroyed by booze and wrath. During the years of crisis when drink and wrath were slowly eating away at James Hetfield, Francesca Tomasi came into his life as an unexpected anchor. An Argentinian who works behind the scenes on Metallica's tour crew. They met in the early 1990s when James was still a crazy machine who always had a bottle of alcohol in his hand. At first, the relationship looked like any other short-lived romance a rock star may have. But as they got closer, Francesca showed James a tranquility and firmness that he had never seen in anybody else. They got married in 1997. It was a big step forward for James, and it was also his first real attempt to start over and become a family guy instead of a fugitive who drank too much. Francesca was not a star and never made it onto the pages of magazines, but her calmness and simplicity were the break James needed in his life. He often said that his wife was the one who made him face his addiction and the one who pushed him to go to rehab when things got out of hand. Their marriage wasn't just about love, it was also about James learning how to deal with the demons of his past. He brought his wrath, passion, and outbursts from the stage into their home, which made things very tense at times. James could be like a ticking time bomb, Francesca said once. She had to set a boundary because the family couldn't live if he didn't change. That firmness made James make a choice, and he selected his family. Kelly T. Hetfield, born in 1998, Castor Virgil Hetfield, born in 2000, and Marcella Francesca Hetfield, born in 2002, are their 3 children. Castor is now the drummer for the band Bastardines. For James, it was a whole new chapter. He added that seeing his daughter sleep sweetly or seeing Castor practice drums made him happy and kept him sober. James was a loving father at home, trying to be there for his kids as much as he could. This was very different from how he acted on stage. But no marriage is safe from stress, especially when the husband is a rock star who has been through a lot and has to deal with the stress of celebrity. In 2019, the news broke that James and Francesca had split after being together for more than 25 years. No one ever said why, but everyone knew. The inner fights, the relapses, and the never-ending fight with addiction had created scars that were too deep to heal. For James, it was a different type of loss. Not as loud as Cliff Burton's death or as violent as the injuries on stage, but a quiet, never-ending ache that was worse than any burn or scar. Many people still think of Francesca as the savior who guided James Hetfield through his worst years. Even if that marriage ended, he still had 3 kids, 3 bright spots in the life of a metal leader who had almost lost himself more than once. James Hetfield, the fiery and explosive frontman of Metallica, has been linked to the band for a long time. But offstage, he is full of paradoxes and intensely human feelings. When they were young, people jokingly called them alcoholica, which was a harsh term that fit because booze was basically Metallica's 5th member, always there for rehearsals and tours. James would drink so much that he would lose control and blank out entirely. He couldn't remember how he had played or what he had said on stage. He said that he didn't remember many concerts later in life and that he shook when he thought about those foggy years. Not many people know that Hetfield almost made it to Hollywood. In the late 1980s, he was asked to try out for the role of the Terminator in the famous movie series. There were even rumors that he was up for the role of Wolverine in X-Men. Even though none of these projects happened, they showed how special James was. He still picked the guitar over the movies, but fans often joked that Hetfield was like a metal superhero come to life with his tough frame, ferocious eyes, and snarling voice. James never thought of music as just Metallica. He was a huge Aerosmith fan from a young age and looked up to Steven Tyler and Joe Perry as his first inspirations to become a rock star. He bought Lynyrd Skynyrd's Sweet Home Alabama with his own money, which was a pure musical recollection before life took him in a frenzy of strong riffs and non-stop touring. James had another nickname at school, Hammer. This was a reference to his carpentry talents gained from his father and his hard, uncompromising personality. James wanted excitement as a rocker too. He was really into skating, breaking his arm several times, which almost stopped the band. Metallica's management gave an ultimatum after a number of gigs were cancelled because of injury. James was not allowed to skate at all. Without that thrill, he turned his love to building and collecting historic cars, even selling rare cars at auction for charity. His rebellious side was still there, but it was tempered by a sense of duty to society. James Hetfield has grown up because of terrible times. James, on the other hand, found calm in nature. He raised bees, spent hours watching birds, and publicly said it was his personal hobby. After evenings of intense performances and the roar of tens of thousands of spectators, he found peace by sitting quietly by his hives or watching a flock of migrating birds. For Hetfield, being outside wasn't just a hobby. It was good for the soul. James also tried his hand at acting. He played a police officer in the 2019 movie Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, which was about the life of serial killer Ted Bundy. People were startled by how real his acting was. He also did voice work for the animated series Dave the Barbarian and the Skylanders video games, which made a big impact outside of metal. By 2024, James Hetfield was not only the heart and soul of Metallica on stage, but he was also having an impact in other areas. After 72 seasons, 2023 was a hit. The band went on the huge M72 World Tour, which lasted from 2023 to 2026. In 2024, Metallica took Europe, North America, and Mexico by storm. In 2025, they added Australia and New Zealand to their trip, which was their first visit there in years. James still had the aura of a renowned leader every night, even though his voice and physique showed signs of age. Hetfield got notice in movies again, this time in The Thicket with Peter Dinklage. He said he wasn't really like acting, though. Still, his engagement made people curious and showed that he could do more than just music. In 2025, Jonas Åkerlund's documentary Metallica Saved My Life came out. It told the stories of fans from all over the world, and Hetfield himself talked about his struggles with addiction, insecurity, and rehabilitation. The movie reminded me that Metallica is more than just music, it's a lifeline for millions of people. James, on the other hand, kept working towards social responsibility. He and Metallica kept doing good things through the All Within My Hands Foundation, especially during the month of giving in 2025, when they auctioned off valuable objects to raise money. James also got a lot of attention for a new tattoo that had the ashes of Lemmy Kilmister, the lead singer of Motorhead. This was a sign of respect for the man who inspired him his whole life. Even though he was busy touring, Hetfield still went back to his peaceful places in Colorado, taking care of bees, watching birds, and working quietly in his wood shop. He is now in his 60s, and he is no longer the wild rebel frontman he used to be. Instead, he is the senior statesman of metal. On stage, he is still tough and dominating, but in private, he is humble and thoughtful, living completely in the present while carrying the weight of the past. If you only looked at Metallica's numbers, over 125 million albums sold, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, and dozens of sold-out tours across continents, James Hetfield would already be remembered as one of the most successful rockers of all time. But his legacy goes far beyond numbers. Hetfield is more than just a singer. He and Lars Ulrich started the band thrash metal, which turned a type of music that was originally thought to be loud and rough into a worldwide cultural phenomenon. His sharp riffs have set the standard for how metal guitarists play for more than 40 years, from Kill 'Em All to Master of Puppets to Death Magnetic. Hetfield has been a guide for younger musicians for years, from Pantera and Slayer to Slipknot, helping them find their own strength. Even famous people like Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Iommi have said in public that Metallica brought metal to levels that Black Sabbath had only dreamed of. Hetfield, who was both a leader and a fighter, became the face of metal to the general public. James has had an impact on more than just music, though. He became a symbol of the struggle within, of having the courage to recognize weakness, and of falling and getting back up. His fight against addiction, his several stays in rehab, and his patient hold on sobriety have inspired many admirers who were also fighting their own demons. Hetfield was more real than any superhuman ideal because he was prepared to cry, talk about his lonely history, and admit that he sometimes got angry for no reason in his marriage. James Hetfield is an elder statesman of metal and a senior figure in rock music and popular culture. He has acted in movies, contributed his voice to charity projects, and been in a lot of documentaries about rock culture. Hetfield is more than just a singer to millions of people, he is the voice of rebellious youth. A sign of willpower and proof that an artist can face their deepest wounds. James Hetfield has been at the top for more than 40 years. He has made a name for himself in the history of heavy metal and in the imaginations of generations of fans. Teenagers still listen to his music in their bedrooms, professionals still listen to it on their headphones, and huge stadiums still play it. And even though those songs frequently sound angry and nasty, they are really a statement. Music may still bring you brightness, even when darkness absorbs you entirely. James Hetfield has been with Metallica for more than half of his life. He is both a living icon and a reminder of how fragile people are when they are in the spotlight. He had a horrible childhood, lost family members, struggled with addiction and wrath, yet he rose from the ashes to keep the music alive. Hetfield turned wrath into a force that unites millions of hearts, from guitars that tear the air apart to hoarse lyrics full of sadness. The question still lingers, though. How much of his private life did he give up to be in the spotlight? How many wounds did he agree to? In order to become an immortal icon, wounds that may never heal? Maybe that exact struggle is what makes James Hetfield so powerful. He is not a flawless legend, but he is terribly and deeply real. And what about you? What do you think James Hetfield's most important legacy is? Metallica's timeless songs? Or the tale of a guy who had the courage to face the dark to find the light again? Leave your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel to keep the metal flame alive.